and don't let fear stop you or stand in your way, because the secret is that everybody has that fear. Everyone has that little bit of self-doubt in them. But if you know that you've been well trained and well prepared, then you need to go for it, and don't let anything get in your way.
Hi, I'm Deirdre Breckenridge. I've spent my entire career helping women to get unstuck, to share their stories, nurture relationships, and to grow their brands. But most of all, to find their voices so they can make a difference. Women Worldwide features the stories of passionate women and the ups and downs of their journeys. With deep insight and advice, let Women Worldwide ignite your passion so you can excel in life. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Women Worldwide. Thanks for tuning in today. Now, before I get to my special guest, and she's waiting in the green room, I just want to mention that, I've been talking about the growing numbers of listeners all across the world, and I've been giving Women Worldwide updates. Well, one thing that I also wanted to point out is that all of the sharing and the conversations around Women Worldwide has helped to attract the most amazing guests. And you know what? That's what this show is about. Getting people on the show who are willing to share their stories, their successes, their challenges, and their insights and advice for you. And we know that's what you love. You're telling us that, and that makes me really happy. So thank you. Thank you for all the ways that you are helping to grow our network. Okay, let's dive into today and our special guest, who is Diana Burley. Diana is a globally recognized cybersecurity expert, and she's a professor at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. Now, Diana is a woman in STEM, so she advocates for that, of course. And she's also somebody who's really up on the cybersecurity trends, and she knows how individuals and businesses can better protect themselves from hacks. She's been on numerous media outlets, Bloomberg, MarketWatch Radio, Huffington Post, and now she's on Women Worldwide. So instead of me going on and on about Diana, she's here to share her journey with you. Diana, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. It is a pleasure to be on with you.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. So are you in Washington, D.C. right now?
I am in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., yes.
Cool, very cool. Washington is definitely one of my favorite places, and we have a lot of listeners in Washington. So I'm gonna love this episode. Okay, let's start off a little bit with your journey. How did you decide to go into cybersecurity? Is that something that when you're a little kid, you say, I want to be in cybersecurity?
Well, I hope that little kids today say that for sure. That's part of my work, but certainly not when I was growing up. Cybersecurity was not something that was not a household word, was not something that I thought about. For me, I was always very interested in technology and how technology shaped people and their behavior and how they interacted with each other and how they shaped the technology and how it developed. And so my interest was really at that intersection between people and technology. And from that, I just continued to do work and ultimately got to this area that was called cybersecurity.
That's really cool. And as you were finding your way and seeing this intersection, were you feeling like this is out of my comfort zone? Or did you ever feel that you were so far stretched out of your comfort zone, or did it all just feel very normal and natural?
It was my passion. And so I was very interested and very curious. And so was I ever in a position where I felt outside of my comfort zone? Yes, every day, still every day. But that was part of the excitement for me. So I like that feeling. I like the feeling of I have lots of preparation, but I'm on the edge and I don't quite know what's ahead of me, but that's okay. It's exciting and we'll figure it out. So yes.
No, that's really cool. And I also wondered, I'm sure listeners, you're also wondering, what's it like to be a woman in cybersecurity?
Well, it can be lonely for sure, but I don't think about it that way. I think about it in terms of the impact that I can make, not just on other people who see a woman and a woman of color, but on the field in general. It's all about the work and trying to make a difference and trying to secure the systems that we use to do our everyday lives. And so it certainly can be lonely at times, but I think that that's really any field. And so I don't let that bother me or stand in my way.
No, that's good. And also, you're probably a really good role model for others. I mean, maybe there was a time when there weren't a lot of women, whether it's in cybersecurity or any STEM career. The more who go into it, the more role models there are, leads the way and just makes it easier for younger generations. So that's
Absolutely.
really important. Do you have any advice for, women who might be thinking about entering, young women in college? I mean, you're a
Yeah.
professor.
Yes, I mean, I tell people all of the time, follow your passion. Make sure that you are prepared to enter whatever field it is that you're trying to enter, and don't let fear stop you or stand in your way, because the secret is that everybody has that fear. Everyone has that little bit of self-doubt in them. But if you know that you've been well trained and well prepared, then you need to go for it, and don't let anything get in your way. But for me, it's always been about the passion, knowing
Mhm.
that this is what I wanted to do, this is what I felt was my calling, and I didn't let anything stop me from doing that. And that's what I say to our young women, young students of color, or anybody who wants to go into the field.
Oh, that's great. So if someone is starting out, a younger professional,
Mhm.
what would their education path look like? Or even if it's somebody who's in a completely different career, but says, you know what, this cybersecurity sounds really interesting. What kinds of classes, what kinds of degrees, what do you need to do to get into it?
That's really the beauty of this field, is that cybersecurity, while we talk about it as if it's one thing, it really isn't. It is a very, very broad field. And so there is no one path. There's not even 10 paths. There are so many different ways to enter different parts of the field. But what I say to people is that you want to make sure that whatever your pathway, that you are taking classes that force you to think about complex problems,
Mm.
that you develop your analytical abilities, that you develop your communication abilities, because even if you're in a very technical part of the field, you have to be able to communicate effectively about the threat and the nature of the threat environment to other parts of the organization. So communication is key. Analyzing is key. Understanding behaviors is very important. So there are many skill sets that you can develop regardless of the particular pathway that you take.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm so glad that you mentioned communication, because as a communications professional, I always say to whether it's students or young professionals or anyone in the field, with communications, you can do anything. You're
Mhm.
going to need communication skills wherever you go. So,
Absolutely.
case in point, share that. So, thank you. I'm
Yeah.
glad you said that. What about relationships? How did relationships in your life kind of help you? Was it either mentors who helped shape your career? How
Oh
important is
my
that?
goodness. Oh yes. Relationships are key, because that's where the trust comes in terms of people who can make introductions for you, people who can see pathways that perhaps you cannot see. I can't tell you the number of times that mentors have said to me that I needed to take advantage of a particular opportunity that I didn't see it. I didn't particularly want to
Huh.
get involved with the opportunity. I didn't see the value or the benefit, and I had wise mentors who said, "Trust me, do this." And sure enough, I found that they were right, and that it paid benefits. And so I think that and probably for any field, but certainly for someone who is coming into a field that is perhaps new, and unfamiliar, it is very important to have mentors, but it's also very important to have peers. Cybersecurity is a team sport,
Right.
and it really is something where you have to rely on your friends and colleagues, because you as an individual, I as an individual cannot possibly understand or even be aware of all of the different aspects
Right.
that need to be addressed. And so that's why you have friends and colleagues and people who you can collaborate with to effectively meet the challenges.
And what might some of those challenges be, if you can share? So when you're in a field and you are a global cybersecurity expert, I can only imagine, not to divulge any secrets or anything, but what are just some of the challenges that you're up against?
Well, I think that, oftentimes when people think about cybersecurity, they think about the technology.
Yeah,
And the technology is critically important. It's very important, but it is not the only thing to think about. And so one of the things you have to consider is, are the people involved, the behaviors, the different cultures, the different motivators for why people are perhaps acting maliciously. Sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's unintentional, it's by accident, but how do you begin to understand people's behavioral intent, or how the structure or frame of their organization and the culture within it drives behavior or prohibits or inhibits behavior? And so understanding that it's people, it's processes, it's technology all combined helps you to address the threat holistically, but also helps you to recognize that there's no way that any one individual can be an expert and aware of every aspect of all of those. And so
right.
you really do have to collaborate as a team, because something that you're doing in one place, everything is a lever, right? And so everything causes a reaction in another place. And you need people who are able to say, hey, Diana, don't do that. Or if you do that, here's what will likely happen as a result. And so you can collectively meet the challenge.
Right. Do you think that most businesses today are prepared for the threats that they face? I know it's a hard question, but do you think that they're where they need to be, or there's a lot of
Well,
work to be done? Because you said
you know,
people, process, and technology, and that takes a lot to get up to speed.
it takes a lot. And so, I mean, I think that even those businesses that are prepared, because the threat is constantly evolving, being prepared today does not necessarily mean that you are prepared tonight, let alone
Right.
tomorrow. So I think that, we don't want anyone to get into a state of a false sense of security where, because they haven't had a breach, or because they don't know that they have had a breach, that they won't have one in the near future. And so there has to be a constant state of vigilance that all organizations maintain.
I can only imagine. So it's not just one and done. It's
No, it's
keeping,
constant. That's
yeah,
right. That's right.
absolutely. What about on the personal side of technology? Were you always one to feel comfortable? Were you advocating for technology? Were you prepared yourself of what you share, data privacy?
I, it's a learning curve for everyone, and certainly me included. I think that just in terms of sharing, I tend to be more private
Yeah.
than perhaps a lot of people. I don't know that that's because of the field that I'm in. I think it's more my personality than anything else, and it just happens to align quite nicely with my field. Um, but with any evolution, and technology is certainly an evolution, and we're constantly getting new tools every day, there's really no way to keep up with everything. And I think that I am probably like every other mother of young adults, where I don't even try as much as I call my kids and say, hey, can you do this for me? Or know, tell me how to make this work. And they roll their eyes and sigh, and then they make it work. And so I say,
Oh,
thank
I've been doing
you.
that for years.
That's right. That's what we do. So I'm no different than anyone else. I think that, in part, understanding and using the technology, particularly as it evolves so rapidly, it is all about not being afraid to try things. It's very rare that you will break something. And so,
That's true.
part of this is that you have to just say, you know what, I'm going to try to make this work. And if I don't succeed, I'll try something else, or I'll ask for help, and I'll just keep going.
Exactly. What about how do you stay on top of your field? So you mentioned that, when we were talking about companies, how they have to be really vigilant with their people, process, and systems. But as a cybersecurity expert, where is your learning come from?
Yes, so we have to be ever vigilant as well. And cybersecurity, being in this field, is certainly a lifelong learning experience. And so if it's reading trade publications or going to conferences, meeting with colleagues, sharing different things that have happened or different techniques, there is a constant learning that has to take place. And that's one reason why it is particularly important for people who go into this field to have that passion, because then it doesn't feel like work.
Yeah.
It's just something that you do. It's when you go to the newsstand, instead of picking up the fashion magazine, you pick up the cyber magazine or the tech magazine or the business magazine or something, because you just want to know, you want to continue to learn and grow, because it's interesting. And so I do all of those things, and every successful cybersecurity practitioner or scholar, I mean, everyone in the field is really doing the same thing. We're constantly reading, constantly learning, and that's just part of what we do.
And are you all, I mean, there's so many groups that form private groups on social media. People are finding their tribes. Do you do that as well? Do you use social media as a place where you can learn more and collaborate with other experts?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I think we forget that mentoring has changed so much in the sense that you can be on social media and you can be mentored within
You
a
really
group.
can. You can learn a lot. I mean, there are a lot of stories about different things that have happened, or different techniques or different strategies that people are sharing, that you can learn, that you can access and share. I have found that reaching out to people that perhaps I don't know, but with whom I share a connection, a mutual colleague, is a way of continuing to learn and to grow that network. Again, we as cybersecurity professionals tend to be risk averse and fairly private, so it's not as easy as just reaching out to random people. But certainly, when you have connections in common, leveraging those connections to gain access to additional experts and their expertise is an important tool in the continuous process of learning.
Absolutely. So yeah, I'm just curious, because you said that cybersecurity experts are risk averse and you are a private person. When you're online and you're sharing or you're purchasing something and information is being passed and you're being tracked, do you read all the data privacy information that companies put up so that because we hear all the time it's out there, but consumers don't read it. Are you like the 1% actually read stuff because you know that it's
I
important?
don't even think it's 1% who reads. I think it maybe is 1/100th of a
I
percent.
wasn't sure. So maybe you're part of that point
Oh,
zero 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 one.
I can't say that I read every single one. I skim them. How about that?
Well, that's good. I mean, everybody listening, please, or watching, skim.
I mean, you
Privacy
skim
stuff.
and you make assumptions, and I think that the difference is probably, rather than one of whether how much or how deeply I read or not, I think that part of the difference is I assume that they are going to take my data and use it at their at their discretion. And
Right.
so I think that that's a different assumption, where some people might go in and assume that their data is private and won't be used, and that's just simply not the case. And so you assume that by using the service, you're giving up all of your rights, and then you make choices and decisions accordingly. And I think that is really the big difference. That
So
yeah.
can you protect yourself? I mean, I know that as a business, I'm sure there are certain things that you can do, but for all those listeners out there, is there something that they can do to better protect themselves from being hacked?
Oh, absolutely. We call it cyber hygiene, but individuals can do things to to help themselves. You can use strong passwords, so not the name of your dog.
I know.
It's tip. Yeah, that's a key giveaway. It's not the name of your dog. You can make sure that you're using different passwords for every site, so that if one is hacked or infiltrated, that doesn't give people access to all of the other sites. You can change them regularly. Don't click on links that come in email from unexpected sources. Even if you believe that it's true, you can always go out to the website separately and go in and make sure that you're going into the actual site as opposed to clicking on links from unfamiliar sources.
That's a great point. I didn't
So,
think of
you know, you have to, there are things that you can do as an individual to be careful. Absolutely.
what do you think of some of the services like a LastPass, where
Mhm.
they sort of scramble all your passwords for you, keep it in a vault? There's like this master key that nobody could crack to get
Mhm.
in. Is that a good way to protect yourself?
Those kinds of services can be very helpful, particularly if you
Yeah.
think about all of the different places that you have to log in these days and all of the different passwords that you need to have. It can be extremely difficult to remember all of those, and you need a mechanism for doing that. And so I think that as people look at the different tools for how they can help to manage their security in their lives, tools like that can be particularly helpful.
Yeah, I have that. So I'm glad you said that. It's a good idea. Thank you for saying that. I just also wanted to ask, because I mentioned before, we talked a little bit about you being a professor. Are you teaching classes around cybersecurity, or is it totally different what you're teaching?
So right now I am not teaching. I am running a research institute at the university. So
Oh,
yes, the
that's
I3P,
interesting.
the Institute for Information Infrastructure Protection. And so I am
Wow.
currently focused on running that research institute. I do develop and am in the process of developing some executive education courses that we're offering through the university. And so I'm doing that kind of work, but I don't show up at a classroom every week or a couple times a week. Not right now.
You miss being in the classroom?
There are days. This is not one of those
For
days.
minutes?
Well, there are certainly days. This is not one of them because it is grading time. We're right up
Oh,
against commencement, and so many of my colleagues
it's a
are
rough time.
in the buried underneath final papers and that. So I'm not. I don't miss that. But certainly I very much enjoy being in front of students and being able to engage with them and nurture and mentor them. And so I find that there are certainly days when I miss it, but I'm fortunate that I do have opportunities to still engage with them, even if it's not as the formal faculty member or professor of record for a particular class.
That's
I find
fantastic.
opportunities.
Oh, that's so good to hear.
Yeah.
So, Diana, I'm just going to ask you to hold your thoughts for a moment. We're going to shift our focus over to our sponsor of today's show, which is Routledge Publishing. And Routledge is one of the leading academic publishers of books and journals in the world. And they just so happen to be the publisher of my book, Answers for Modern Communicators, which is a Q&A book. I answered over 150 questions. So Diana, I thought it would be a lot of fun if I pick a question from the book that I've already answered, but you can share your answer. So,
Okay.
okay, let's see. What is your question going to be? Are you ready?
I think so.
Okay, question number 34. What do you do when a situation looks grim? I'm sure you've had those situations.
You mean after I finish crying, right?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Once I finish crying, I look for solutions. I think that, in my career, in life in general, and certainly in this field, there are many times when you look at the situation and think, oh boy, don't know how we're going to get out of this one. But that's when you have to just sit back and take a deep breath and start to unbundle the problem. I usually find that if you can break it down into enough pieces, that you
Yeah.
can begin to chip away. And once you have chipped away at the things that you can, the aspects of that grim situation that you actually can address, then you have a more manageable set of items that you need help addressing. And you can begin to strategize on what to do and who to go to and how to overcome those.
That's
But
a
I cry
great
first.
answer. Cry first, pull yourself together,
That's right.
and break it down, because you're right. When you chip away at it, all those separate parts, they don't look as maybe
They don't look
daunting.
as daunting. That's right.
Yeah, that
That's
is a
right.
great point. Okay, so Diana, we are going to dive back into our conversation again. And let's start with, I don't know, maybe you could tell us something about what you've learned about yourself, maybe that was surprising over these years in your career as a cybersecurity expert.
Something that has been surprising about me.
Yeah, that you just didn't know about yourself, where you said, oh, wow, I did that. Or, oh, wow, I did that.
I think that one of the things that has surprised me is the impression that I have made on different people. Now, I don't know that I have always tried or been intentional about mentoring. It was just something I did. And, there have been several occasions when I have been at a conference or doing something where someone has come up to me and said, you don't remember, but you spoke to me when, and it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and it stayed with them. Whatever I did or whatever I said stayed with them and helped to motivate them to move forward. And I can't tell you how wonderful it is and how that keeps me going. And it wasn't something that I really thought about, but it's something that has surprised me and really warms me and motivates me to keep going.
Thank you for sharing that. That is so gratifying. You just never know how you touch somebody's life, but when they come and share that with you, it's got to
Mhm.
feel so good.
Yeah, yeah.
It's fantastic. Okay, here's a might be a tough one.
Okay.
What about learning moments? So everybody has the aha moment, and sometimes you have a uh-oh moment. Can you share one moment with us, an aha or an uh-oh, that really, made you think differently? Not easy.
Actually, I'm going to take you all the way back to when I wrote my dissertation in graduate school to get
Cool.
my PhD, because, the answer that I gave earlier about chipping away at grim moments, I think is when I really learned that lesson. Because when I went to my major advisor for the last time with the last set of big changes that she had given to me, I didn't realize that it was the last time or the last set of major changes. I just was doing what she had told me to do. And I wasn't focused on finishing the dissertation. I was focused on finishing that particular task. And so when I went in and we discussed it and she felt comfortable with where I had ended up, she looked at me and she said, okay, great, you're done. And I said, done with what? And she, it was, you're done with your
Surprise.
dissertation, you're finished. Let's wrap this up. And I was stunned. I truly was shocked, because in my mind, I hadn't been thinking about the big picture. I had been focused very much on the individual task, but we had broken it down into so many small tasks that every task was doable. And that was my big aha moment, when I realized that no task, no matter how large, is unachievable. You can begin to break it down, and when you do, you begin to accomplish these little pieces, and ultimately you are able to accomplish that very large goal. And I did this, I've had my PhD for 20 plus years now, and so that's a lesson that stuck with me, and that's how I approach um, everything at this moment.
Oh, I'm so glad you shared that. That was an awesome moment, right? To be
It
like,
was.
I'm done. How
It
fantastic.
was. Yeah.
So you know, that is a success right there. Just being able to break things down and reach this point of, wow, I'm finished. How do you handle, and you know, I'll bring it into my world as the entrepreneur and the business owner. We always talk about make mistakes, failure, you know, that's good. Learn from it. But in your world, do you feel the same way about make mistakes, failure, that's okay? Or in cybersecurity, it's like, uh-oh, no, no. Gotta be careful
Oh,
there.
I mean, so I'm a researcher first, right? And they're not mistakes as much as they are options that didn't work that you cross off the list. And so you look for,
Interesting.
because you're looking for a solution,
Right.
right? And there can be many possible solutions, whether we're talking specifically about cybersecurity or we're talking about um, just research in general. And so for me, I don't approach it as I tried this, it didn't work, and so therefore I failed. I approach it as there is a very large potential solution set. And I tried this potential solution, it didn't work, so I can cross it off the list, and now my potential solution set is smaller. And ultimately, that quote failure takes me one step closer to
Right.
finding the right solution. And I think that that's true for cybersecurity too, in a sense. I mean, I'm not suggesting that there are things that we don't do that are just flat out wrong, because they are. But my approach is one of, make a decision, and if it, I mean, you fail forward fast, right? You try it, it
Yep.
either works or it doesn't. If it doesn't, then you learn from it. You take what you've learned, and then you use that to inform the next solution that you try, and you just keep going until you get it right.
So,
Because failure is not an option. You have to
right.
find the solution. You have to secure the system. You have to keep people safe. You have to get there. And so you can't let one step backwards stop you from getting
Right.
there. You have to leverage it to move forward.
Yeah, those stakes are really high.
The
Um,
stakes are high.
when you talk about, you know, the problem solving and what you do, is everything by the numbers, by the analytics, by what the research shows? Is there any gut instinct?
Sure,
So,
sure. There's gut, and I think that you develop that instinct over time, right? I mean,
yeah,
you get to know and understand, and that's in part why um, people ask me all the time about being a woman in the field, or being someone from a diverse background, or an African American or something. And
right,
part of the answer that I give in terms of why we need to have diversity in the field is because we all come from different experiences, different backgrounds, and those different experiences, the diversity of our backgrounds, informs those gut reactions, right? If
right.
something that says, you know what, that doesn't feel quite right, or I think we need to make an adjustment. And when you have those different voices all coming together, you're able to develop very robust solutions that, yes, of course, you have to get data to support, and you have to make sure that you analyze and all of that, but you approach it from a very different place because you have brought together differences of opinions and thoughts that are based on different experiences and different gut reactions to different challenges.
Yeah, that's so important. You bring so much more to the table with all the
You
different
do.
perspectives.
When you have a
Mhm.
diverse team in the room, you bring a much more robust set of experiences, and you're much better able to address a very complex um, and evolving and increasingly complex challenge.
So I'm just curious, and probably you are out there too, all of you listeners, or if you're watching on YouTube, what is a day in the life of a cybersecurity expert look like? So Diana, from just one typical day, what can you expect? Is it always the same? Is it whatever happens? Describe your day.
Well, I- I'll describe a day for me,
Okay.
and I think that that's part of the I don't know, the the desire, the connection, the excitement of my life and my field and my career is that all of my kids
Passion.
are different. They're all different. So I'm primarily a researcher. I'm not in the operations group, and so I won't speak to what their days are like. But from my day, it could be that I am working with a client to develop some kind of strategic response to the way that they are putting their cybersecurity programs together. I might be working with a research team to do some deeper analysis into. Oftentimes I'll work with clients that are companies and they have some deeper problems, some things that we're going to take a little bit more investment in terms of the just analyzing it, that they don't have the time to do because they have an operational pace. And
Sure.
so I will work with my team to go deeper and to really investigate. And so that it could be that I'm doing interviews, it could be that I'm diving and working through documents. I do a lot of speeches, things like this. Could
Great.
be talking to students that day. So it really varies. And then there are some days, not many, not as many as I think I would like, that are quiet when I can just sit and write. And that's part of what I love to do as well. I love to sit and put puzzle pieces together and then write so that I'm able to get those thoughts together and get them out. But part of the beauty of my role, I think, is that there are no 2 days that are alike.
Yeah, no, that sounds so interesting. When you said that, you go deeper for clients, they're making that investment. They can't do it because they're focusing on the operations.
Mhm.
Are you the one who sort of gets them to go deeper, or do businesses or your clients recognize the need to go deeper?
I think it's a combination of both.
Yeah.
It's a combination of both. Sometimes it's that I've met with someone because they have said, look, we keep implementing solutions, or we keep trying to change, for example, we keep trying to strengthen the cybersecurity posture of our organization by changing the behavior of our employees. And we've done several different interventions and none of them seem to be working as well as we would like, but we don't know why.
Hmm.
And we don't really have the time to do interviews and to really get at those underlying issues. So they might ask me to do that so that they can then implement solutions that will be more effective. And it could be that they have figured that out, or it could be that they've heard something or they've heard someone else or I've talked to them at a conference or at a meeting or something, and I've said, hey, based on what you said, this is what I think. I'd love to come in and talk to you more about that. So it's the direction goes both ways in terms of who initiates that.
Right. Have you ever been on the operational side, or has it always been on the research side for you?
I have always been on the research side, I have had some operational stints, but not where I was responsible for those operations in terms of securing the enterprise um, alone. So, for me, it's always strategic, developing policies, developing strategies, and, kind of working from that end.
Right. What are some of the hot topics that you're talking about when you go and speak at conferences? What do people want to
Uh,
hear? If you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, I think certainly one aspect is that people want to hear about how to change behavior. They recognize that people can be a very weak link in terms of the security of the enterprise, and so they want to understand
Sure.
how do we actually get at changing behavior. I talk a lot about how to develop the workforce, how to attract and retain the workforce. There's a significant shortage in our field, and so I talk a lot about that. Um, Educational strategy, so I kind of have that whole side. But I also talk about strategic issues and strategic decision making around cybersecurity and developing policy and those things. And then executive level, how do we bring to the table the executives that are not in charge of cybersecurity, so the CFOs and the CEOs and the boards. How do we communicate effectively the nature of the threat, the nature of the need, so that they come together? So, a variety of different topics. Something that's very hot right now is the evolving threat environment, and how new technologies like, IoT devices and such are
Oh, yeah.
changing the landscape and changing the dynamic. So I talk about that. So really, there's a very large swath of topics.
You have a lot to talk about, no doubt about that.
Yes.
Are things like cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, is that in your world with data and privacy and security? Does that fall into it?
So I'm certainly not an expert on cryptocurrency, but to the extent that it changes the dynamic of the threat landscape,
Yeah.
as a motivator for why we're seeing such a surge in things like ransomware, I talk about it in that context.
Got it. Well, you're not going to believe this, but we're up to the advice question in the show. So you're like in the home stretch. So, Diana, after everything that you've shared, what would you say to people, business professionals, individuals out there, about their own security? Give them some advice, or any tips that you want to share with them.
I guess I would say be proactive. I think about it very much in the same ways that when you go to a doctor and the advice is you don't just take the advice from the doctor, or you don't sit passively, you have to be an active patient. And so I would say the same thing here. You have to be an active citizen in the digital space, whether you're an individual or a business. It really is up to you to be aware of the nature of the threat environment that you face. And that awareness doesn't mean that I'm saying to everyone, go out and read everything there is to read or become a cybersecurity expert. Sometimes it means engaging with people like me or like others that can do that work for you. But recognizing that you have a role to play, and that you need to be vigilant in making sure that you're doing whatever you need to do to keep yourself secure. Don't rely on others to know and do everything on your behalf. Ask questions, raise issues, think about it. When you're a business and you're writing contracts with suppliers and partners and such, ask questions, because it is really up to everyone to take an active role in securing cyberspace that we are all working in and living in.
Excellent. Best advice of the day. Be proactive. Diana, thank you so much for coming on the show. What about, tell us where people can find you.
Well, people can find me on Twitter at Diana Burley.
Nice.
They can also find the website for the I3P. It's just the I3P.org. You can also find me on at GW's website, or you can Google me,
How
Diana
about
Burley.
LinkedIn? Are you on LinkedIn?
I'm on LinkedIn as well.
Good.
I will say, though, that I don't necessarily answer all connection requests. So, if you're asking to connect with me, please tell me when we met and why you're asking to connect.
There you
But
go.
yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming on the show, sharing your journey, all the insights from the problem solving to the tips about being proactive, data privacy. Really appreciate your time. So thank you.
Thank you. No, my pleasure.
Such a pleasure to chat with you. And thank you to all of you listeners out there for tuning into Women Worldwide, for sharing the stories. We love that you're chatting with us on Twitter, that you're sharing on Facebook, that you're rating us on iTunes. Keep it up. Keep the conversations going. And tell us, what do you love from the guests who come on the show? Because when we hear that these stories and the advice is helping you, then we just want to bring you more. And if you get a moment and if you want updates, you can go to the womenworldwideshow.com website and you can sign up for our updates. So thank you, everybody. And until our next episode, stay focused, energized, and feeling empowered. Thank you.